Morning, Dougal, said Florence. Morning, said Dougal tersely. You're rather terse. I feel terse. In fact, I've never felt terser. Why, what's the matter? Said Florence. Well, I was woken up this morning by some terrible jangling thing. I feel jangled. I'm never at my best when I'm jangled. I think it was a fire engine or something. No, I don't think it was, Dougal, said Florence. That's it, screeched Dougal. Definitely it. An alarm clock, said Florence. Alarm clock, said Dougal. Sounds more like Big Ben gone mad. Really? Now, what's it doing now? Huh? The alarm clock was trying to speak. What's it saying? I'm not sure, said Florence. Well, tell it to go and alarm someone else, said Dougal. It's very pretty, said Florence. Thanks very much, said the clock. But what's the use of being pretty if you can't wake anyone up? True, said Florence. I'm a failure. You woke me, said Dougal. Oh, did I? Did I? Said the clock. Yes, you did, said Dougal. Oh, good, said the clock. You see, said Florence. Yes, good. Good? Good? What's good about it? Said Dougal. Now, Dougal, steady. Steady? I'm exhausted, and I shall go and get some sleep. Don't start that again. Do not start that again, or I shall lose my very considerable temper. All right? I thought I made myself clear. Now, Dougal. It's all right for you. You're human, but dogs need their sleep. Good night. Now, don't worry about him, said Florence. I'll find you someone else to wake up. Try a snail. Who? They said. A snail. Someone calling me. Someone calling me. Me. Someone calling me. Good morning, good morning. Everyone up bright and early? Oh, did I say something? You're always saying something, great oaf. You've hurt its feelings. Look, I just wanted to wake someone up, said the clock tearfully. Well, we'd like to help, said Florence. You speak for yourself, said Dougal. Oh, I know. That rabbit. You know someone who needs me, said the clock. I should say so, said Dougal. Of course, said Florence. That rabbit needs an alarm clock the size of a house. I should think you do very well. And Dougal went to have some refreshment with the excitement of it all. Dougal? Yes. Now, where's that rabbit? Florence called Zebedee. I'm glad you called, said Zebedee, because it's time for bed. Hoist with my own petard, sighed Florence. What? Said Dougal. And the clock tried to do what lots of people had tried to do before, and failed.
Whither away so fast? Said Brian. Just practising my speed trials, said the train. I'm the fastest thing in the garden, she said. Care to have a race, said Brian, against little old speedy me? The train shook with laughter. My dear, she said. But Brian was not put off. A race, he said. All right, said the train, I'll give you 3 miles start. That's telling him, girl, said Francis. When you're ready, said the train, giggling. Just limbering up, said Brian. So am I, said the train. Ready? Whoop. Dougal was looking for Brian. I don't know. When you don't want them, snails are under your feet. But when you do want them, can't be found. I hear your friend Brian is giving the train a race, said Ermintrude happily. What? Said Dougal. Racing a train? He's gone off his head. At last. Florence arrived. And Zebedee. I hear there's a race going on, he said. Care to go and see it? Oh, very much, said Florence. It's between Brian and the train, said Zebedee. Most unusual. Florence was delighted. Spinning well, I see, said Zebedee. Shall we go? So they went. Dougal was organising things as usual, but Florence wanted to start the race. Ready, she said. And they were. So they went. Care to take a bet, said Dougal. I should like the snail to win, said Ermintrude, but then I'm a sentimental old thing. He's 4 miles behind already, said Dougal. Give him time. Time? He'll need it. Florence picked some flowers for the winner. But the train ran out of steam. And so, finally, did Brian. Florence wondered where they'd got to. Been arrested for speeding, I shouldn't wonder, said Dougal. Poor pathetic little clump. I shouldn't have let him do it. Ermintrude said the contestants seemed to have given up. But it was very, very exciting while it lasted. Yeah, about as exciting as the weather forecast, said Dougal. But Ermintrude insisted it had been exciting. Zebedee arrived. Race over? He asked. Looks like it, said Dougal. I'm thinking of entering them for the next Monte Carlo rally. Well, better get to bed then, said Zebedee. All right, said Florence. And she asked Dougal to give the flowers to Brian and the train. Good night, she said. I wish people wouldn't leave all the work to me, sighed Dougal. How do I pick this lot up? Really? Really? Feel such a fool. Mr. Rusty was worried about his chimney. It needed sweeping. He told Zebedee. Sweep it then, said Zebedee. Yes, well, easier said than done in this day and age, said Mr. Rusty. You don't see a lot of chimney sweeps about for some reason, do you? Zebedee went to have a look. You're right, he said, and Mr. Rusty had to laugh. You look a proper caution, he said. A proper caution? And he laughed like a bucket. Don't fall off, said Zebedee coldly, trying to be dignified. Oh, I'm sorry, said Mr. Rusty. It's just that you looked a proper caution, said Zebedee, slowly. Exactly, said Mr. Rusty. And then they thought about the best way to get the chimney swept, without the sweeper being a proper caution. Florence met Dougal in the garden. What have you got there? She asked. It's my patent chimney-sweeping device. Oh, I see, said Florence, going for a little walk. It's extremely clever and simple, said Dougal. Bit like me, really. What do you call it? Said Florence. The hedgehog, said Dougal. And what are you going to do with it? Sweep chimneys, said Dougal. Oh, yes, said Florence. What am I going to do with it, really? Muttered Dougal. You're muttering, Dougal, said Florence. They arrived. Now, where's that snail? I told him to be early. Never trust a mollusk. But Brian was on his way. Here I am, old fat friend, he said. Watch it, said Dougal, and come on. Florence wondered how it was all going to work. Won't work, said Brian. Of course it will, said Mr. McHenry. Florence started things off. Now, who's going up? She said. They all blenched, especially Dougal. Well, someone's got to go, said Florence, but no one seemed very keen. Shall I go? She said. Why not? Said Dougal. Oh, said Florence, and thought about it. Dogs climb ladders, said Mr. McHenry. Go on, Dougal, said Florence. No, said Dougal, so loudly they all jumped. Oh, well, said Florence. I think it's a job for a human being, said Brian. It's a two-legged job, and I haven't even got one. It's a well-known fact. Snails are legless. Mr. McHenry finally volunteered and went up on the roof with Dougal's chimney sweeper. Careful. Could someone go inside and tell me if anything's happening? Said Mr. McHenry. Nothing startling as yet, said Brian, peering. Mr. McHenry worked away, to some effect. And then, unfortunately, he dropped the sweeper, with unfortunate results. Oh, was ever a snail so put upon? And Brian went home in a snaily huff. What? Florence giggled when she shouldn't have. What's going on? Said Zebedee. I thought you were sweeping chimneys. And he went to investigate. Good night, sighed Florence. Did I do it right? Said Mr. McHenry. Well, not quite, said Florence. Mr. Rusty was still worried about his chimneys. I'm worried about my chimneys, he said. They'll have to wait, said Florence. Don't forget to wash before bed, said Zebedee. Mr. Rusty had written a letter to the local council, protesting about road conditions in the garden, and Florence agreed the traffic was getting heavier. Zebedee asked what the trouble was. I'm campaigning for a green belt, said Mr. Rusty. I'm sure you'll look very pretty, said Zebedee. Shall we go? In the garden, others were campaigning about a variety of things. And everyone, including Dylan, was busy preparing signs prohibiting or advocating or demanding various things for various needs. Even the birds. And Penelope. And the train. Between her shunting activities. And Mr. McHenry. And, of course, Brian. It was obvious some coordinating had to be done, so Zebedee asked them all to explain their signs. Me first, said Brian. But Zebedee said he would leave it to Florence to choose the order, and would they please put their signs on the posts and explain. They agreed. Everyone should be given a fair hearing, said Zebedee, and they agreed again. Democracy, said Zebedee. Lovely, said Ermintrude. Penelope was to be first, and she explained her sign meant danger, spiders at work. Dylan was next. Your turn, Dylan, said Florence. Lazy thing, said Penelope tartly. Dylan's sign was no hooting, rabbits sleeping. Ermintrude was next. I wonder what it'll be, thought Florence. It was keep off the flowers, and then it was Dougal's turn. Oh dear, thought Florence. Keep cows off the flowers, said Dougal. Doesn't look a bit like me, said Ermintrude haughtily. Mr. McHenry's turn, said Florence quickly. And Mr. McHenry's sign meant, apparently, scooters only. Cheek, said the train. And when Florence asked for her sign, put up one which simply said, trains only. The twin birds were next. Crazy, said Dylan, for their sign meant music permitted. Florence had a look at the signs. You know, we might get a bit cluttered, she said. It'll be more cluttered when lightning gets here, said Dougal. Lightning was on his way. 1 mile per hour maximum speed, said Brian. Typical, said Dougal. Mr. Rusty was last. Flowers are best, he said. Oh, I agree, said Florence. Dogs are best, said Dougal's well-known fact. Well, dogs are all right, said Mr. Rusty. Except one, watch where my eyes rest, said Brian. Zebedee asked if the signposting had gone well. All right, said Mr. Rusty, but I maintain there should be just one sign in the garden. Which one? Said Zebedee. This one, said Mr. Rusty. Mine. Man, said Dylan, I'm out of breath, like exhausted, you know. Do you want to be a Scottish rabbit or not? Said Dougal. What's going on, Dougal? Said Florence. Oh, I'm teaching yon rabbit the rudiments of the pipes, said Dougal. But yon rabbit didn't want to be taught the rudiments of the pipes. I feel kind of foolish, ma'am. Where are ye, wee rabbit? It's very wearing, ma'am, said Dylan, and he sat down to have another practice. It's an ill wind, said Dougal, etc., etc. Mr. McHenry wanted to know who was being tortured. It's Dylan, said Florence. And it's not torture, said Dougal. He is learning the noble art of bagpipes. Ah, bagpipes, said Mr. McHenry. I've got some of those somewhere. Well, there's hope for you yet, said Dougal. And when Dylan arrived, Mr. McHenry left to get his bagpipes. We'll have a pipe band, said Florence. Mr. McHenry came back with his bagpipes. What's that? Said Dougal and Dylan. Well, I use the pipes to water the garden, said Mr. McHenry. Dougal left in disgust. Sacrilege, he said. Sacrilege. What's the hole for? Said Florence. That? Oh, that's for catching rain, said Mr. McHenry. That's a very useful instrument you have there, said Dylan. Florence called Zebedee, and when she asked him for a needle, he produced one. Any thread? Said Florence. No, I don't have any thread, said Zebedee. Now, what could I use instead? What are you looking at me for? Said Dougal. We need thread, they said. Not from me, said Dougal. Oh, one little piece, Dougal, about so long, they said. I can't spare it, said Dougal. Get off. Fiends. You won't miss one little hair, said Mr. McHenry. What? I am very attached to all of them, said Dougal. So get off, get off, get off, get off. Fiends. Taking advantage of your shaggy friend. Fiends. Well, it won't hurt, said Zebedee. Really it won't. No, it won't, said Florence. Painless, man. Painless? Tearing great lumps of hair out by the roots? You're a band of savages. I'll report you all to the RSPCA, or the head of BBC One, whoever that might be. What? There. Didn't hurt, did it? What? Thank you, Dougal. Something tells me I've been taken advantage of, said Dougal. And I hope your spring squeaks. Oh, don't be like that, said Zebedee. Florence finished sewing Mr. McHenry's bagpipes. Time for bed now, said Zebedee. Can someone play a lullaby? 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 That lot couldn't play any lorry if she had one hand tied behind her back. Lullaby. Dougal was worried about his eyes and was testing out a new pair of glasses. You know, I really think I can see better with these. Much better. Oops, takes a bit of getting used to. That's better. Now, long vision perfect. Now, what about close-ups? Let's see. Dougal's Japes by William Shakespeare. You know, I didn't know he'd written that. Now, visual identification test. Flowers, yes. Very good. Now, what's the time? 10 to 10, yes. You know, I couldn't see that clock just now. These glasses are marvellous. Now, a little drink. Now, what's that? Picture of me? I've never seen that before. Just think what I've been missing without glasses. It's a chastening thought. A chastening thought. Chastening. Florence arrived. Hello, Dougal, she said. What have you got glasses on for? Because I'm going deaf, said Dougal sarcastically. Oh, I see, said Florence. Really, said Dougal. May I have a sit in your chair, said Florence. Be my guest. Dougal, I really would like to know why you've got those glasses on, said Florence. Isn't it obvious, said Dougal. We are none of us getting any younger. Even the keen-eyed and ever-watchful dog begins to need an artificial aid or two. Oh, dear. But, Dougal, said Florence. No, please, don't interrupt, said Dougal. I don't wear them for pleasure, you know. But, Dougal, please don't try to be kind. I know what you're thinking. Poor old thing. He's past it. That's what you're thinking. I'm thinking no such thing, said Florence. If you'd just let me explain. Explain? Explain? Oh, I know what you will explain. You will explain that your friend is still your friend, even though he was growing old and grey and useless. Dougal, I think you're getting rather maudlin, said Florence. And all I wanted to say was... Stop! Think of all the famous people who had to wear glasses. Napoleon? Julius Caesar? I didn't know Julius Caesar wore glasses, said Florence. Ignorant thing, said Dougal. And then there was Genghis Khan and my Auntie Meggsy. One learns something new every day, said Florence. Yes, one does if one listens to little old historical me, said Dougal. But we are straying a little from the point, I think. Yes, Yes, we are, said Florence, because... Now, you're going to say I look ridiculous, said Dougal. I know, but I shall have to learn to live with it, like Shakespeare. What can I say, thought Florence. I'll be bumping into things soon, said Dougal, heavily. Dougal, you haven't got your glasses on, said Florence, very quickly. What do you mean, haven't got them on? What do you mean, haven't got my glasses on? What do you mean? They're sitting on top of your head, said Florence. But why didn't you tell me, said Dougal, instead of letting me wander around, making a fool of myself? I tried, said Florence. Boo, said Zebedee. I like your hat, he said to Dougal, but it's time for bed. Good night, said Florence. Dougal was a bit put out by it all. Good night, Dougal. Yes, it's all right for some. They haven't gone around looking foolish all day. I've gone blind.
When Florence arrived, Mr. Rusty said he had a splendid idea. Oh, what is it? Said Florence. Hide and seek, said Mr. Rusty. Zebedee arrived. Hide and seek, he said. Yes, said Mr. Rusty, all of us. All of us, said Florence. I see, all of us, said Zebedee. So they all went. In the garden, everyone was excited about the game of hide and seek, especially Brian. But who was hiding and who was seeking? Well, I'm hiding, said Dougal. Well, I prefer to hide, said Mr. Rusty, and Florence, and Mr. McHenry, and Dillon. We know who that leaves, said Dougal. Zebedee arrived. Have you decided who's it? He asked. Yes, they said. Brian, said Dillon. Snails are great at seeking, ma'am. They are well known for it. Now, just a minute, said Brian. Just a minute. All decided, said Dougal. Everyone hide. So everyone went to hide. Right, you lot, said Brian. Hide, 'cause I shall be at you like a lynx. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Coming. Like a lynx. 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 Here I come, said Brian. Like a lynx, we know. None of the others had been found, not even Mr. Rusty or Mr. McHenry, who were both fairly visible. No one would be daft enough to hide in there, said Brian. Watch it. Dillon and Florence and Mr. Rusty and Zebedee hid on while Brian sought. Not very good at it, is he? Said Mr. Rusty, and was caught immediately. Dougal began to get the impression that he was being toyed with. And Mr. McHenry discovered that hiding behind his motorbike didn't work. Dougal found Zebedee just before Brian did. And Florence gave herself up. "Where's Lynx Eye?" said Dougal. But Zebedee decided it was time for everyone to go to bed. "Thank you, Brian," said Florence. "Good night." "Good night," said Mr. Rusty. "All exhausted, I suppose?" Florence asked Mr. Rusty if he'd seen Zebedee, and Mr. Rusty said he hadn't, not for some time. So Florence called and waited and wondered, because it wasn't like Zebedee to be late when he said he'd be early. "Stuck in the traffic?" said Mr. Rusty. "What traffic?" said Florence, which made Mr. Rusty think. But before he could decide, Zebedee arrived. "Sorry to be late," he said. "Get stuck in the traffic?" said Mr. Rusty. And then he realized he'd missed hearing something, but he couldn't think what. "Did you notice anything?" said Zebedee. "Like not hearing something you usually hear, for instance?" "Oh, yes," said Florence. "No boing." "Exactly," said Zebedee. "I'm using my spare spring, and it doesn't boing." "Then we must do something about it," said Florence. "Have you seen a spring, Dougal?" she asked. "Have I seen a what?" said Dougal. "A spring," said Florence. "Surely you mean the spring," said Dougal, "or the summer, or the autumn." "Oh, no, you misunderstand me," said Florence. "I mean Zebedee's spring. He's lost it, and I'm looking for it." "Lost it? I thought he was attached to it," said Dougal. "Look, why are you going the other way?" he said peevishly. But Florence didn't listen. She was too busy looking for Zebedee's spring. "Good morning, Ermintrude." "Good morning, dear heart." "Have you seen a spring?" "Spring? Oh, what a lovely time. The flowers that bloom in the spring, tra-la." "Goodbye, Ermintrude," said Florence. "She's never been the same since she did all that moon jumping," said Dougal. "Oh, was that her?" said Florence. Dylan was asleep. "Don't bother," said Dougal. "He wouldn't know a spring from a hole in the ground." "I would too," said Dylan, to their utter amazement. "A spring makes a noise and a hole in the ground keeps silent. It's a natural law, ma'am." "Well, having sorted out that little problem, perhaps we can get on," said Dougal tartly. "Furthermore, a spring," said Dylan, "goes like this," said Florence. "Yes, we know. Thank you." "When you've quite finished pirouetting," said Dougal. "Oh, Dougal," said Florence. "Come on, Pavlova." "Oh, Dougal," said Florence. "Crazy," said Dylan. "Like, crazy. Now, who else can we ask?" said Florence. "I can think of someone," said Dougal darkly. "Boing, boing, 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 boing." "I might have known," said Dougal. "I might have known." "I like it, I like it." "Now that's naughty, Brian," said Florence. "I am setting," said Brian, "a new trend in snail behaviour." Boing, boing. Florence was infected. But Dougal was disgusted. "I refuse to notice what's going on," he said. "Spoil sport," said Florence. "Spoil sport?" said Dougal. "You wait till I get you home." "I like it, I like it." Oh, well. Zebedee arrived and learnt the awful truth. "I'm afraid your spring's a bit bent," said Florence, giggling. "This is no laughing matter," said Zebedee. "Luckily, I'm able to put it right, and I suggest it's time for bed." Mr. Rusty was having trouble with his roundabout, and a high wind. which had made repairs necessary, but at the same time very difficult to carry out. Florence wondered what the matter was. "It's this wind," shouted Mr. Rusty. "It's nearly blown the roof off the roundabout. I'm trying to mend it." "Oh, do be careful," said Florence. Zebedee arrived. "High wind," he said. "Yes," said Florence. "I'd have difficulty keeping my feet if I had any," said Zebedee. "Better go and look into it." "Yes, all right," said Florence. Dougal was having trouble too. "Hello, Dougal," said Florence. "I washed my hair last night," said Dougal, "and now look at it. Just look at it. Ruined. Ruined." "Wind's playing havoc with my tulips," said Mr. McHenry. "Oh, bad luck," said Florence. "Tulips? What about my barnet?" Mr. McHenry tested the direction of the wind. "West," said Florence. "Right," said Mr. McHenry. "Then go and stop it," said Dougal. "Right," said Mr. McHenry. "Can you?" said Florence. "Well, I can try," said Mr. McHenry. "I'd be eternally grateful," said Dougal, "because if this goes on much longer, I'll have to put on an extra vest. Not to mention what it's doing to my well-known and lovely locks. I feel so humiliated. Humiliated." Mr. McHenry told them not to worry. He'd found the trouble. It was a weather vane new to the job and a little uncertain of its duties. "Try and get it right," said Mr. McHenry. "Yes, try and get it right," said Dougal. "I'm sure it's doing its best," said Florence. "Well, that's as maybe," said Dougal. "But what about my hair?" The weather vane tried and tried to control the wind. "It's no good," it said. "I'm a failure." "No, don't say that," said Florence. "Yes, you can say that," said Dougal. "As a weather vane, you are a hopeless failure. You should take more lessons." "Well, I'm very new at it, you see," said the weather vane. "And as I look a bit like a chimney, the winds won't take any notice of me. It's all very, very trying. But I am doing my best." Florence felt very sorry for it. "You see, I might order a nice south wind to blow," said the weather vane. "But it'll just laugh at me and go off to Africa or somewhere." "Well, it's not in Africa now," said Dougal. The weather vane lost control completely. "What can we do?" said Florence. "I'll get better at it," said the weather vane. "I'm sure I will." "Well, you could hardly be worse," said Dougal. Florence decided the weather vane should have a prize for effort at least. "Thank you," said the weather vane. "I know I'll improve." "We're sure you will," said Florence. "We're absolutely sure." "Speak for yourself, smarty boots," said Dougal. "Have a word with Bert Ford. He's got problems too." "Who's Bert Ford?" said Florence. "Oh, don't you know anything?" said Dougal. "I'll keep trying," said the weather vane. "You try me," said Dougal.
Mr. Rusty was playing his barrel organ. "You haven't played that for a long time," said Zebedee. And when Florence arrived, she asked to hear it again. So Mr. Rusty obliged. "Bit tiring," he said. "Going to the garden?" said Zebedee. "Oh, yes, I think so," said Florence. Dougal was waiting. "Hello," said Florence. But Dougal was strangely silent. What's wrong, Dougal? Yes, well, I wish I knew. Oh dear, thought Florence. And then she saw something. No birds, please. All birds out, please. Garden full. Thank you. See what I mean? No dogs, please. All dogs out, please. No dogs on the grass, please. No humans allowed. Thank you. Busy little Apeth, isn't she? Said Dougal, but I think she's got her values mixed up. No birds, no dogs, no humans, no cows, no snails. Thank you. Thank you. Florence didn't quite know what to make of it all. This garden is for the exclusive use of scarecrows. Thank you. If I don't keep a tight hold on myself, someone may get thumped, said Dougal. No thumping, no barking, no speaking. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Yes, and thank you too, said Dougal, for nothing. No thanks, no tipping, thank you. Florence was in a quandary. What shall we do, she said. Well, I could think of something, said Dougal. Florence called Zebedee. Trouble, he said. It's her, whispered Florence. Oh, I know how to handle that, said Zebedee. So he handled it. I admit to being baffled, said Dougal. No baffling, thank you. Everything allowed, everyone in, thank you. Funny what a few new clothes will do, said Dougal. Yes, isn't it, said Florence. Thank you. Funny the things that go on, thought Florence happily. Thank you, thank you. I think I'll go and chase a few snails, said Dougal. Make myself feel better. And he went.
Florence was meeting Dougal, and when he arrived, he said he had something to show her. Follow, he said. Follow. My, we are being tardy, aren't we? I'm being as quick as I can, said Florence. But you're not even moving, said Dougal. Really? Hardly Miss Lightning today, are we? But where are we going, Dougal? That, said Dougal, is a surprise. Follow. Lo, said Dougal. Oh, said Florence. It's lovely, she said. Getting tired, said Dougal. Given your all? Now, don't be unkind, Dougal. Unkind? How can you be unkind to a music box, pray? Everything has feelings, said Florence. I should jolly well say so, said the music box, and especially an artiste like me. An artiste, said Dougal scathingly. It's not easy being a soloist, said the box. No, I'm sure it's not, said Florence. You have discernment, madam, said the box. Thank you, said Florence. Huh, said Dougal. I haven't finished my repertoire, said the box with some heat. It hasn't finished its repertoire, said Florence. I can't wait, said Dougal. Now, come along, Dougal, said Florence. I'm coming, said Dougal heavily. What I put up with in the cause of art.
Mutter, mutter, mutter. You're muttering, Dougal, said Florence. I'm not muttering, said Dougal. I never mutter. You are the world's worst mutterer, said Florence. Dylan came along, found the music box, sat on it, and went to sleep. Dylan, said Florence. Ma'am, said Dylan, I know what you are going to say. Then I won't say it, said Florence. I am sitting on this music box as a protest, said Dylan. Funny sort of protest, falling asleep, said Dougal. Florence was puzzled about Dylan's protest, and so was Dougal, so he had some sugar to give him strength. I'm protesting, said Dylan, against canned music. Listen, instant music, the curse of modern civilization. And he wound up the music box very tightly. Play box, he said. Oh, temperaments, said Dougal. Music schmusic, said Dylan. Schmusic. I'm surprised you listen, man. Music. Huh. Zebedee arrived. Time for bed, I think, he said. Already, said Florence. Sleep well, Segovia, said the music box. Nice, said Florence. Thank you, said Mr. Rusty. Exhausting, though, he said. I may have to fit a motor. It wouldn't sound the same, said Florence, doing a little dance. Do you like my little dance? She said, doing it again. I think it's very moving, said Mr. Rusty. It brings tears to me eyes. Zebedee arrived. What you doing? He said. Little dance, said Florence and Mr. Rusty. Sorry I missed it, said Zebedee. In the garden, Florence called to Dougal, who wasn't there. Brian was. I am shattered and destroyed, he said. Why? Why? I'll tell you why. My shaggy chum has deserted me for another. Another snail? Said Florence. No, no, worse than that. What? I thought I was his only Shelley friend. I was wrong. Brian, said Florence, you must take a grip on yourself and tell me all. Yes, yes, I'll tell you all, said Brian. It's an oyster, a common oyster with a knobby shell. An old shaggy Briggs thinks it's lovely and talks to it all day. Great clump. I've never known anything like it in all my puff. Really, I haven't. Really. Brian was speaking nothing but the truth. Dougal had an oyster. You see, said Brian. Look out, Angus, said Dougal. Ah, company, said the oyster. Common mollusk, said Brian. He can talk, said Dougal. Yes, and so can I, said the oyster. Florence was quite overcome by the complications of it all. I've lost my pearl, said the oyster. He's lost his pearl, said Dougal. Nobody leaves the garden. Find the pearl. Everybody look. Everybody. Florence called Zebedee, who came. Trouble, he said. I've lost my pearl. Oh dear, said Zebedee, that will never do. Is this it?
Looks like a pearl. My pearl, said the oyster. Come home. But the pearl hadn't, and seemingly didn't want to. Ungrateful thing, said Dougal. Hello, Pearl, said Brian. Got it? No, no, stop that. Stop it. No, no. Now, Pearl, said Florence, you're in the wrong shell. He'll sell you, said Dougal, if you don't come out. What shall we do? Said Florence. Don't worry, Angus, said Dougal. Florence called again, and Zebedee came back. Yes? Florence explained the pearl was lost again. Well, said Zebedee, you'd better find it, hadn't you? Hmm? Yes, said Florence. Why don't you go back to Colchester, said Brian. Whitstable, said the oyster. I'll see you later, said Dougal. Fair weather, friend, said Brian. Good night, Angus. Brian was waiting for Dougal, who seemed to be in a hurry. Oh, I got up so late this morning, I don't know whether I'm coming or going. You're going, old speedy mate, said Brian. I've got a million things to do, and I've not had time to put a comb through my hair yet. Yes, looks like it, said Brian. Bit shaggier than usual, if that's possible. What? Choose your words, snail. It's true. You could do with having your barnet trimmed. What a vulgar expression. Yeah, well, I'm a vulgar snail. You can say that again. Well, get your hair cut, said Brian. I will, said Dougal, if I can find someone sufficiently sensitive. Someone who realizes that I don't just want a quick top and tail. In short, an artiste. Florence met Mr. Rusty, and they passed the time of day. Lovely day, said Florence. Beautiful, said Mr. Rusty. Like you. Oh, thank you, said Florence. Zebedee arrived. Late as usual, said Florence. You'll make me cry, said Zebedee. No, I won't, said Florence. She looked for Dougal and couldn't see him anywhere. Oh, I wonder where he is, she mused. She saw something. Never seen that before. I wonder what it is. There was a noise. Florence stopped and was amazed to see Dillon apparently working. Why, Dillon! Ma'am, welcome. Welcome to my hairdressing boutique, welcome. Are you, comfortable, sir? Sir was Dougal. Don't disturb the curlers, sir, until I use the setting lotion, said Dillon. Curlers? Said Florence, aghast. Setting lotion? Sir, you really must keep still, or all my efforts will be ruined. Ruined, 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 ruined. Pardon me. Florence had never seen Dillon like this. He seemed quite agitated and distraught. Perhaps you'd care to look, sir? He said. Sir looked. Can't see anything, he said. One needs to remove the towel, said Dillon. If you'll just wait a moment, I'll take it off. Yes, just a finishing touch. Don't you dare, said Dougal. Florence pretended not to know who it was and said hello very politely. Hello, said Dougal. And Florence waited for something to happen. And something happened all right. Where are you going? You haven't finished yet, you rabbit, you. Florence found herself losing control. How do I look? Said Dougal. Chic? Elegant? That's what I was promised. Have a look, said Florence. So Dougal looked. What's that sheep doing there? Oh, it's me. It's me. I'll sue him. I'll bury his guitar. Ooh, ow. You wait till I find him. I'll make him rue the day he set foot in this garden. Savage. Call himself a hairdresser. He couldn't dress a football. Come back! Come back! Florence found Mr. Rusty in what he called a bit of a state. What's wrong? She asked. Well, I'll tell you if you don't go too far away, said Mr. Rusty. It's the television. Oh? Yes, they've lost their announcer. It's very careless of them, but they do come and go, you know. Zebedee arrived. What's going on? He said. Trouble on the telly? Hector's house on fire? Baba gone home to Africa? Dougal doing the weather forecast? Worse than that, said Mr. Rusty. We've got to find an announcer, said Florence, or no one will know what's going on. So they set out to find an announcer. Me, said Brian. How about me, ma'am? Said Dylan. Me? We'll have auditions, said Florence, then everyone can try. Look, I don't like to seem pushy, said Dougal, but Robert Dougal is a friend of mine. But Zebedee thought that friends in high places was an unfair advantage, and everyone should have an equal chance. Choose something to announce and announce it, he said. Ladies first. Drink more milk, said Ermintrude. Support your local cow. Thank you, darlings. She looks as though she could do with a bit of support, said Dougal. The weather forecast is as follows. If I lie down, it'll rain. If I stand up, it will snow. And if I don't do anything at all, you have to count 3 and run. Thank you. Was I lovely? Very good, said Florence. Zebedee said it was Dylan's turn next. Pardon me, ma'am. Thank you. Children, fellow citizens, fellow dogs, allow me to say a few words about flower power. Mm. As you know, I am a virtuoso on the guitar, and if I can remember a song, I'll play it for you. Dylan? Yes, ma'am. I shall go and put on my spotted bow tie. Brian was next. I should like to give you a short talk on the behaviour and loveliness of the common or garden snail. Anyone got a pair of steps? Dylan laughed. And so did Dougal. Yeah, I think you're all rotten, said Brian. And Zebedee said perhaps Dougal should have a try. Who, me? Me? Oh, yes. Yes. Fluent, said Brian. Dougal had to have a piece of sugar to calm his nerves. And Florence asked him what he was going to announce. I'm thinking, said Dougal. My brain is at fever pitch. We're all agog, said Florence, looking at the Radio Times. And Dougal did his celebrated imitation of a dog eating sugar. Zebedee asked Florence whether she would like to audition. Oh, no, said Florence. Coward, said Dougal. Have a go, said Brian. Well, said Florence, all right. Everyone was delighted. Except Florence. The set awaits, said Zebedee. Get to it. Don't be nervous, said Dougal. Friends, said Florence. Viewers, she said. Time for bed, she said. Mr. Rusty was reading a book. Very interesting, that. Yes, very interesting. What's that? Said Florence. A book, said Mr. Rusty. I found it in an old junk shop, and it's very interesting. You have a look. So Florence did. It's all about magic jugs and bottles. Oh, yes, said Florence. Very interesting. Course, I don't believe it, said Mr. Rusty. Why? Said Florence. Oh, you asked me that a bit suddenly, said Mr. Rusty. I'm not sure why. Florence called Zebedee. Hello, all, he said. Have a read of that book, said Mr. Rusty. So Zebedee read it. Thoroughly. Do you think it's true? Said Florence. Well, anything's possible, said Zebedee. And Florence became very excited. Careful, said Zebedee. I bought something else, said Mr. Rusty. But they were so busy getting excited about reading about magic pots and things, they didn't see Mr. Rusty's other bargain. Until it had arrived. Amongst them. I told you, said Zebedee. I do, said the pot. I'm a pot. We can see that, said Zebedee, but what sort of pot? A talking pot, said Mr. Rusty. I foresee a little trouble, said Zebedee. No need to be like that, said the pot. Oh dear, said Zebedee. Now don't worry, said Florence. I'll go and look for it. Yes, well, that's what I'm worried about, said Zebedee. What was that whooshing noise? I heard a whooshing noise. I hate a whooshing noise. Did you hear a whooshing noise? No, said Florence. Ears bad? Certainly not. Oh, and I don't think it's nice to imply that I'm hearing things. I wasn't. I am renowned for my observation and hearing. Oh! How do, said the pot. How do? What is it? Hissed Dougal. I'm glad you asked me that, said the pot. I am a magic pot with magic spots, and unless you do as you're told, you'll cop it. All right? No, it is very far from all right, said Dougal. You are an uninvited pot. Don't be like that, lad, said the pot. You don't want to upset me, do you? It's a matter of supreme indifference to us, they said. And then they wished they hadn't. Oh dear. Oh dear. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. What have you done? Said Dougal. Yes, yes, what? Said Florence. I warned you, said the pot. Come back at once, said Dougal. Zebedee arrived. Are you going to change them back? He asked. No, said the pot. Oh, said Zebedee, then you'll have to go. And he went to see what he could do. Oops, try again. Florence and Dougal felt very strange, and Dougal had to have some sugar to calm his shattered nerves. I've never been a flower before, said Florence, and Zebedee said she was lucky not to be a flower still. Have a piece of sugar, said Florence. It always seems to help Dougal. Here you are. Watch it, said Dougal. An elephant never forgets, you know. Now, what was I trying to remember, said Zebedee. Oh, yes, time for bed. Is this the day we were going to have our picnic? Said Mr. Rusty. Yes, it is, said Florence. Have you got everything? Everything? Said Mr. Rusty. Yes, for the picnic, said Florence. Oh, yes, the picnic, said Mr. Rusty. And he went away, mumbling. They waited for him. I hope you've remembered the corkscrew, said Zebedee. But if that's all you forget, it should be a great success. Off you go. So they went. Dougal was ready for the picnic. Got everything? He said. Corkscrew? No one ever remembers a corkscrew. Well, we've remembered, said Florence. And a tablecloth, said Dougal. I'm not eating off the bare ground, you know. I've got to have a tablecloth. Damask. None of your plastic. Oh, come on, said Florence. Mr. Rusty wasn't sure they'd remembered everything. I feel sure there's something, he said. I've remembered the salt and pepper, said Brian. I am the most useful and resourceful of snails, you must admit. All together now, for he's a jolly good fellow. Now that'll do, Brian, said Florence. Sorry, said Brian. Now, will here do, said Florence. Any ants? Said Dougal. I can't abide an ant. We're not all here yet, said Mr. Rusty, waving the corkscrew. Ermintrude arrived. Oh, I love a picnic, she mooed. It's so lovely, eating out of doors. What is she on about? Said Dougal. She always eats out of doors. It's a well-known habit of cows, eating out of doors. I'll bet no one's remembered a corkscrew, said Ermintrude, and salt and pepper. Oh, yes, we have, said Mr. Rusty and Brian. So there. Dillon arrived. I've brought these cushions for the picnic, he said, because I feel everyone should be comfortable, ma'am. Comfort is very important at picnics. Mr. McHenry had brought all sorts of useful things like knives and forks and spoons and plates and vases of flowers and placemats. No finger bowls, said Dougal. Florence took the cushions. Nearly ready? Said Dillon. Then I'll arrive. Looks very pretty, said Brian, and Dougal and Florence agreed. And so did Mr. Rusty and Ermintrude. Very pretty, they said. There's just one thing, said Dillon. Did anyone bring any, food? Food? Said Mr. McHenry. I don't think I can bear it, said Dougal. And they all realized they'd forgotten to bring the food. We're all soppy, said Brian. No one can possibly realize how humiliated I feel, said Dougal. Hello, said Mr. Rusty. Hello, said Florence. Just giving the old barrel a turn, said Mr. Rusty. Yes, I heard it, said Florence. Zebedee arrived. Shall we go? Said Florence. Why not? Said Zebedee. Yes, why not? Said Florence. In the garden, she looked for Dougal. Who was looking for her, somewhat agitatedly. Ah, there you are. Oh, I'm very glad to see you. I can't tell you how glad I am to see you. Why? Said Florence. Oh, I wish you hadn't asked me that, said Dougal, because I don't know how to break it to you. I know you're very fond of her. Who? Said Florence. Who? Oh, I don't think I should tell you, you know. Oh, dear, oh, dear, oh, dear. Oh, dear. Oh, dear. Oh, dear. Now, who, Dougal? Ermintrude. I'm afraid she's been affected by all those poppies she's been eating. Poppies? Said Florence. Well, it's either that or the pansies. I don't know which is worse. But whatever it is, the poor old thing's in a very bad way. I think her moon-jumping days are over anyway, if she ever did it, which I doubt. It's always seemed a very unlikely story to me. Very unlikely. Dougal, said Florence, will you kindly tell me what this is all about? All right, said Dougal. That cow is flying a kite. Kite, said Florence. A kite, said Dougal. C-I-T-E, kite. She is flying a kite. How lovely, said Florence. Lovely, said Dougal. It's unnatural. Cows don't fly kites. Cows eat grass and do a lot of mooing and lying about in fields and things of that nature. Well, perhaps she felt like a change, said Florence. That's hardly a reason to fly a kite, said Dougal. I've brought you a few flowers to nibble, said Dougal, kindly. Bless you, dear boy, said Ermintrude. What you doing? Said Dougal. I'm flying my kite, said Ermintrude. Very relaxing. Would you like to have a try? That's very kind of you, said Dougal. Well, hold on tight, said Ermintrude, with reason. What? 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 Help! 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 It's a very good kite, said Ermintrude. I do hope he doesn't lose it. I hope we don't lose Dougal, said Florence. Oh, don't worry, dear thing, said Ermintrude. He'll come down to earth, eventually. Florence rushed to the scene. "All right, Dougal," she said. "You cannot imagine," said Dougal, "how infuriating a question like that can be when you've just been up in a kite and crashed." Florence was waiting for Zebedee, who arrived. "I'm a bit late," he said, "because I was trying to get a ticket for the exhibition." "What exhibition?" said Florence. "The one in the garden," said Zebedee. "The one everyone's been talking about. It's very difficult to get a ticket, so I wouldn't bother to go if I were you. You won't be able to get in, and then you'll be disappointed, won't you?" "Oh, you are infuriating," said Florence. "Of course I shall get in." Dougal and the others were waiting. "Hello," said Florence brightly. "Got your ticket?" said Dougal. "Very difficult to get in without a ticket, you know." "Got a ticket?" "Oh, Dougal," said Florence. Dillon told her she didn't have to have a ticket. "Do I have to have a ticket?" said Ermintrude. "No, ma'am," said Dillon. "Anyone with a tail gets in free. So you qualify," he said, laughing. "When you're all quite finished," said Dougal. "Lead on, mighty leader," said Brian. And they all went to the exhibition, which Florence had been asked to open. "I declare this exhibition open," she said. "Very prettily done," said Dougal. It was an exhibition of pictures. "How lovely," said Florence. "Not quite the word I would have chosen," said Dougal. "Anigonioni's latest, I presume." Brian found a picture he liked. "What delicate brushwork," he said. "That'll look very good in my kitchen." "This one seems familiar," said Ermintrude. "Is it you, Florence, dear?" They looked at Brian's portrait. "A very good likeness," said Ermintrude. "Yes, but has it caught the essential me?" said Brian. "Nothing's essential about you," said Dougal. "Now, don't be unkind," said Ermintrude. They looked around some more. Dillon and Brian admired the carrot picture as connoisseurs. "4 carrots in a fog," said Dougal. "Look over here," said Ermintrude. "My effort, ma'am," said Dillon, modestly. "I mace you," said Ermintrude. "You wouldn't stand still," said Dillon. "Well, I like it, said Brian. "You like anything," said Dougal. "Well, I think they're all lovely," said Ermintrude. "Don't you?" "Yes," they said, even though Dougal had some doubts about Brian's portrait, and said so. And they all had doubts about another portrait. For some reason, it seemed a little familiar, although they couldn't place the face. "What I want to know," said Dougal, "is what she's laughing at." "She's smiling," said Florence. "Well, I think she's got a very funny look on her face," said Dougal. "And I wouldn't want to meet her in the garden after dark. I can tell you that. Come to think of it, I wouldn't want to meet anything in the garden after dark." Mr. Rusty told Florence that he'd been thinking. "It's a long time since I went on holiday," he said. "Oh, were you thinking of going now, then?" said Florence. "Well, yes," said Mr. Rusty. I can't think where to go, that's all." "Well, we'll ask Zebedee," said Florence. "He's good at holidays." "I heard that," said Zebedee. "Go and see Dougal. He's best at holidays." "You know," said Mr. Rusty. "I'm not too sure about the wisdom of this. Look." "Hello, Dougal." "Welcome," said Dougal, "to the Dougal Travel Service. Holidays arranged, satisfaction guaranteed." "Brian helping?" said Florence. "Yes," said Dougal, heavily. "I certainly am," said Brian. "I work out the best way to go with my map and my powerful brain." "What map?" said Dougal. "Wolverhampton," said Brian. "Wolverhampton?" said Florence. "It's a lovely place," said Brian. "Yeah, but I'm not sure that's where I want to go," said Mr. Rusty. "Oh, I can see we're going to have difficulty with this client," said Brian. "Doesn't want to go to Wolverhampton. That poses problems." "Well, I don't want to be difficult," said Mr. Rusty. "Yes, they all say that," said Brian. And Dougal explained that everything had been prepared for the Wolverhampton tour. The special luggage was all ready, for instance. "And the tropical kit," said Brian. "Gets very hot in Wolverhampton, especially if you keep your vest on." "Well, I don't want to be difficult," said Mr. Rusty again, "but I don't want to go." "How about Stoke-on-Trent?" "How about abroad?" said Florence. "Abroad?" said Brian. Ooh, that's tricky." "You don't want to go abroad," said Dougal. "All those foreigners milling about as though they owned the place." "Really, Dougal?" "Well, what's wrong with Britain? I could offer you the Grand Canal, Manchester, or the Doge's Palace, Dundee, or the Leaning Tower of West Ham," said Brian. But Florence and Mr. Rusty weren't interested. "Well, in that case, we'll have to think of something else," said Brian. Florence apologized for being difficult. "Oh, well, that's all right," said Dougal. "We really wanted to go somewhere exotic," they said. "More exotic than Wolverhampton?" said Dougal. Brian fetched more travel books while they prepared for an exotic holiday. "How about China?" said Florence. Brian and Dougal went quite pale. "China," said Florence. "China," said Mr. Rusty. "The very place," said Florence. But Brian and Dougal weren't too sure. "Can you arrange it?" said Florence and Mr. Rusty. "At once?" "Are you quite sure you wouldn't prefer the Hanging Gardens of Leeds?" said Dougal. And Mr. Rusty and Florence said they were absolutely positive. "China or nothing," said Florence. Dougal consulted Brian. "How do we get them to China?" "Bicycle?" said Brian. "That," said Dougal, "is a soppy suggestion. It would take hours. And anyway, what are they going to say in Wolverhampton?" Florence told Mr. Rusty that she felt energetic, and Mr. Rusty said he thought that was a very good way to feel. In moderation, of course. "But it's a long time since I felt energetic," he said. "Very long time." "Oh?" said Florence. "But I was very good at the hop, skip and jump in me youth," said Mr. Rusty. "Very good indeed." "I'd like to have seen that," said Florence. "It was a sight, I can tell you," said Mr. Rusty. "A rare sight. People came for miles to see me do the hop, skip and jump. A rare old sight." "Don't you do it any more?" said Florence. "Not a lot," said Mr. Rusty. Zebedee arrived. "Everyone feeling energetic?" he said, "because there are great goings-on in the garden." "Right, everyone here?" said Dougal. "Then I'll begin. Today, as you know, is the day of the great race." "I didn't know," said Florence. "You're not the only one, dear heart," said Ermintrude. "Well, I know," said Brian, "and I am the very popular captain of my team, which consists of one snail, one rabbit, and one cow." It is a race against the clock. 1 lap of the track and no using bicycles. All right? Everyone understand? Dougal set the clock. We each have to carry something, said Brian. Perhaps someone would care to carry me, said Ermintrude. I'm quite light. Now stop messing about, said Dougal. Sorry, dear thing, said Ermintrude. Who's going to start? Said Brian. I will, said Florence. Go on then, said Brian. And Florence went. Stop! Something wrong? Said Florence. You didn't say ready, steady, said Dougal. Oh, Mr. Perfection, said Brian heavily. Ready, steady, go. And Florence went again. Mr. Rusty, who had to go next, waited nervously for Florence to come back, checked it was really his turn, and set off, showing some of his old hop, skip and jump figure. Bravo, said Ermintrude. Who would have thought he had it in him? Dylan wondered if he'd stay awake long enough to take part. Play up, said Ermintrude. So Dylan played up. I'm not quite sure I can finish the course like... Oh dear, I'm like exhausted. But Zebedee was a flying umpire, and Dylan found he had to go. Whose turn? Said Brian. Yours, Snaily dear, said Ermintrude. And Brian showed them what he was made of, with a little help from Zebedee, like pointing him in the right direction. Dougal waited, and then set off. He got a little sidetracked by a pile of sugar. Oh, the temptations they put in your way these days. What shall I do? Remember the team, said Zebedee. Oh, the team, said Dougal. What's keeping him, I wonder, said Ermintrude. And when Dougal came back, off she went. Oh, I feel such a fool. Zebedee said they'd wait for Ermintrude to get back and then decide the winner. Ermintrude did finally get back, and Zebedee declared her the winner. I owe my victory to clean living and vegetarianism, said Ermintrude. Florence asked Dougal how he was. Well, I've got a new collar on and it's not broken in yet. Collar? Said Florence. Of course, said Dougal. You don't expect me to come out undressed, do you? Oh, no, said Florence. I suppose that would never do. It certainly wouldn't, said Dougal. But I didn't know you wore a collar, said Florence. I mean, I've never seen you wearing one. Are you accusing me of nudity? Said Dougal. And Florence was just assuring Dougal that she wasn't accusing him of anything, far be it from her, etc., etc., when something came along. Morning all, said the violin. Stradivarius Smith's her name, but you can call me Strad, if you've a mind. I've come to give you the benefit of my company, and if I find I like you, I may rip you up a short concerto. I shall require complete silence, but you don't look like a noisy lot. Am I right? Eh? Am I right? Eh? I don't know what this garden's coming to, said Dougal. Does the BBC Symphony Orchestra know about you? Hmm? Orchestra, said the violin. I'll have you know that I am a soloist. Oh, temperaments, said Dougal. Hush, said Florence. Come with me, said the violin. So they went. This is where I live, said the violin. I give midday concerts to a very distinguished audience of musical trees. Yes, he does, said the trees. Florence was amazed, and so was Dougal. "I can see you are amazed," said the violin. "They are amazed," said the trees. "Amazed, amazed." Florence couldn't get over it. The trees were amazing. "As an audience, they're a bit rustly," said the violin, "but they come in useful in many ways." "Like they come in handy for quartets and things," said the violin. Dougal was very bewildered. The violin produced some strings. "We leave nothing to chance," it said. "Yes, I can see that," said Florence, also bewildered. "And now I'd like you to meet someone very special," said the violin. "My baby." "No one will ever believe it," said Dougal. "Oh, it's lovely," said Florence. "Lovely." "That's my little Pitsy," said the violin, "short for pizzicato." "Really?" said Florence. "Takes after his dad, does Pitsy. Always on the fiddle." "That's the oldest joke I have ever heard," said Dougal. "Sorry," said the violin. "Couldn't resist it." Florence called to Zebedee, who arrived. "Look," said Florence. "It's called Pitsy," said Dougal. "Well, I'm not surprised," said Zebedee. "It looks like a Pitsy." "When he grows a bit, I'm going to try to get him into the Halley," said the violin. "Good idea?" And Florence said she was sure it was. "It's all madness," said Dougal. Florence and Mr. Rusty were waiting for Zebedee. "He's late," said Mr. Rusty. "As usual," said Florence. "Am I late?" said Zebedee sweetly. "Yes," said Florence. "Kindly explain." So Zebedee explained that he'd been having a look round, and there seemed to be something happening in the garden she might be interested in. "But of course, if you're angry with me for being late, you probably won't want to go," he said. "Oh, you," said Florence. "She's late," said Dougal. "Children nowadays, really." "Am I late?" said Florence. "Not at all, dear thing," said Ermyntrude, much to Dougal's disgust. "There's too much rush, rush, rush these days. Everyone rushes about like a bull at a gate." Ooh, what am I saying? "But be that as it may, I shall take my time and browse along, and you never know, the odd flower may find itself chomped as I go, but at least I won't rush. I shall strike a blow for leisure." Brian was running a raffle. "It's in aid of shipwrecked snails," he said, "and I want you all to buy a ticket, 1 carat each." "You're joking," said Dougal. Mr. McHenry bought one. "Very wise," said Brian, "and I hope you will be the lucky winner of a wonderful prize." Dylan bought one as well. "When's the draw?" they said. "When I've sold all the tickets," said Brian. "That'll be the day," said Dougal. But Florence bought one. "I wouldn't trust that snail with a tram ticket," said Dougal. "Isn't it exciting?" said Florence. "Huh," said Dougal. "I wonder if I'll win," said Florence, hopefully. "All right then, any more for any more," said Brian. "Oh, get on with it," said Dougal. "Great oaf." "Want a ticket then?" said Brian. "No, I do not," said Dougal. "Oh, go on," said Brian. "Be a sport." "You might win something, Dougal," said Florence. and the others urged Dougal to get a ticket. So finally, he did. "Congratulations," said Brian. "All right then," said Dougal. "What happens now?" Do we choose our prize?" said Florence, hopefully. "No, not quite," said Brian. "Not quite." "I knew there'd be a catch in it," said Dougal. Florence read her ticket carefully. "What's it say?" said Dougal. "It says this ticket must be given up in return for laundry," said Florence. "So does mine," said Mr. McHenry. "I knew it," said Dougal. "The rogue." "But it also says there's a special prize for the lucky number," said Florence. "Lucky number of what?" said Dougal. "Ah," said Brian. "Oh, look," said Florence. "That must be the prize." Dougal inspected. "I wonder what's in there. A year's supply of lettuce? Yoo-hoo! You know, I've always wanted to do that." "Well, that's a prize," said Brian. "Ticket number 4. "Ticket number 4? gasped Dougal. "And the lucky winner gets a kiss," said Ermintrude. "Where are you, dear thing?" "I've gone abroad." Oh. Florence asked Mr. Rusty if Zebedee had arrived yet, and Mr. Rusty said he hadn't. "Oh," said Florence. And Zebedee arrived. "I hear tales of cooking in the garden," he said. "Now, let me see. Have I got everything? Oh, dear, people come to plague me." "We haven't come to plague you," they said. "We're spectators," they said. "Oh, joy," said Dougal, heavily. "What you making, old cooker?" said Brian. "Pancakes," said Dougal. "You're lovely," said Brian. Florence read the recipe. "What next?" said Dougal. "Milk?" said Florence. "Ah, well, yes. Well, I am waiting for the milk, aren't I?" said Dougal. "Mm-hmm. About time," said Dougal. "Herbs?" said Florence. "Yes, I'm waiting for those too," said Dougal. The herbs arrived. "Here we are," said Mr. McHenry. "Essence of herb, straight from the garden." "Well, perhaps I can get on now," said Dougal. "Yes, I think you probably can," said Florence. And Dillon said he'd play some pancake music to help things along. Dillon dropped off, but the pancake making went on. Dillon, refreshed, played on. "When are we going to, eat, man?" said Dillon. "Oh, I love a pancake," said Ermintrude. Florence cooked the first pancake. "Now, careful," said Mr. Rusty. "Don't burn yourself. Now, toss your pancake in the air. That's the right way." So Florence tossed the pancake. "Bravo," said Ermintrude. "My turn," said Dougal, but Dillon got there first. "Suits you, Snail," said Dougal, giggling. I'm a failure, men, said Dillon. Yes, you are, said Brian. Hit me right on the bonce. Are you implying my pancakes are heavy? Said Dougal. I make the lightest pancakes in the world. I'll have you know, in the trade, they are known as Dougal's Delights. Mr. McHenry had lost something and was looking for it. Wherever can it be? He said. Florence came along. Hello, she said. You haven't seen it by any chance, have you? Said Mr. McHenry. Seen what? Said Florence. It's escaped, said Mr. McHenry. It's very worrying. Dougal was looking for something too. Now, where is it? He said. What? Said Florence. What's everyone looking for? I can't find it anywhere, said Brian. No, you wouldn't, said Dougal. Typical. Oh, don't be like that, said Brian. What is it? Said Florence. I don't know, said Brian. I was just told to look for it, and I always do as I'm told, because I'm little and lovable, and everyone takes advantage of me. Of course, I mention no names, but watch where me eyes rest. I can't find it, dear heart, said Ermintrude. Well, it's big enough, said Dougal. Nevertheless, said Ermintrude. Really, said Dougal. It would help if we knew what we were looking for, said Ermintrude. Exactly, said Brian. We need information. Can't find it, man, said Dillon. Like nowhere. I'm not surprised, said Ermintrude. Suddenly, they heard something. That's it, said Dougal. What is? Said Brian. That, said Dougal. Scatter and find it. So they scattered to find it. I scattered the wrong way. A strange object appeared. That's it, hissed Dougal. It landed. Oh. Well, I never. Whatever next? That was it, said Dougal. If I'd known, I'd never have looked, said Ermintrude. What a fright I got. Was that it? Said Brian. Yes, was that it? Said Dillon. Like it? And they said it was. Crazy, said Dillon. I couldn't agree more, said Ermintrude. Horrible thing. Mr. McHenry came back and told them he still couldn't find it anywhere. They asked him what he was looking for. Well, it's my new flying planting machine, he said. It flies. Does it indeed? Said Dougal. Yes, it does, said Mr. McHenry. I call it the flying saucer. That's what I wanted you to find, said Dougal. Well, we found it, dear thing, said Ermintrude. I don't want to worry anyone, said Dillon. What do you mean? Said Mr. McHenry, worried. Well, it's that machine of yours, said Dillon. It's like driving me crazy. It keeps planting things, and every time I want to take a little sleep, it wakes me up and plants something on me. I got an earful of primrose roots, man. I mean, flower power is one thing, but this is ridiculous. Ridiculous? Time for bed, I suppose, said Florence. How do you expect me to sleep, said Dougal, with that thing about? Dillon woke up and began to think about his life. Where am I going? Is it true what they say? Do I sleep too much? Dougal was having a little think as well. Now, where's that rabbit? It's got to stop. The time has come, definitely. You know, I don't think I've ever once seen him leaping about like a rabbit. And what about all this hole digging he's supposed to do? Not one single hole dug in years. He's getting rabbits a bad name, that's what he's doing. Now, I'm as tolerant as the next dog, but it's got to stop. He'll be growing his hair next and voting Liberal. Dylan's worries about his life were making him walk in his sleep. And when he woke up and found himself on his feet, he got more worried than ever. I'm cracking up, he thought. Oh my, oh my, oh my. What shall I do? He groaned. You have a problem, little furry mate, said Brian. I can tell by your nose. You leave my nose out of this, said Dougal. Zebedee asked what the matter was. That rabbit, said Dougal. He'll have to go. That rabbit had decided that a few gentle exercises might be a good idea. And perhaps a little sprint. All he needs is a little exercise, said Zebedee. He should get a dog. What am I saying? He went to see Florence, who was doing a few exercises too. They're worried about Dylan, he said. Oh, said Florence. I'd better go and see then. Dylan was still at it, swimming, using a stool instead of water, even though water would have been less hazardous. Shadow boxing, which he found even more exhausting. 7, 8, 9, 10, out, they said. Now, what do you mean about my nose? Said Dougal. Well, when you get worried, it twitches, said Brian. Florence asked Dylan if he thought the exercises were doing him any good. Do you feel any better? She asked. Ma'am, I feel dreadful, said Dylan. I'm beginning to think a person shouldn't try to change his natural way of life. And with me, sleeping is in, and exercise is out, out, out. Out. I wonder, said Florence. Now listen, said Dougal. Oh, man, spare me, said Dylan. Can I help it if I'm naturally, lazy? Now listen, said Dougal. But Dylan didn't. He's running, said Dougal. You know it's time for bed, said Zebedee. Yes, I could do with a sleep, said Dougal. Touché. Dougal and Florence were up rather late one day, and wondering where all the stars had gone. Do you think it's cloudy? Said Florence. Well, that would be the simple explanation, said Dougal. What do you mean? Said Florence. Well, you never know in this place, do you? I expect someone switched them off. Oh, can you do that? Said Florence. Can you do it? Of course you can do it. Oh, I didn't know, said Florence. The ignorance, said Dougal. Now, I didn't come here to be insulted, said Florence. Hoity-toity, said Dougal. And anyway, I'm not at all sure you're right, said Florence. Have you ever known me to be wrong? Said Dougal. Florence looked at him. Well, I mean about basic, well-known things like stars, said Dougal. I may have made little errors in the past about minor matters. Well, I'm only human, you know. But you're not human, said Florence. Well, if you're going to get personal, said Dougal, you can go and look at the stars with someone else. I shan't care. And he got all huffy. Now, there's no need to get huffy, said Florence. Who's huffy? Said Dougal. I'm never huffy. I only said you weren't human, said Florence, and you get huffy. I thought we came to look at the stars, said Dougal, huffily. So they counted the stars, which had come out during the argument, and found there was still quite a lot missing. Yes, quite a lot missing, said Dougal darkly. Someone has been tampering. So they counted them again. I make it 1 short now, said Dougal. I wonder where it is, said Florence. Dillon arrived. I've found the craziest thing over there, he said. Over where? Said Dougal. Over where? Why, over there, man, said Dillon. Craziest thing you ever saw. I presume eventually he'll tell us what it is, said Dougal. But Dillon said he'd show them what it was. And it was the missing star, come down into the garden for a change of scene. It's a bit dark here, isn't it? Said the star sweetly. Well, what do you expect? Said Dougal. You're supposed to be up there shining away. On strike, I suppose. It's very pretty, said Florence. Thank you, said the star. You may call me Estelle. Estelle, said Florence. Well, it should be Stella, but I changed it, because I think Estelle is much more suitable these days, don't you? Any star who is anyone is called Estelle. I don't know what this garden's coming to, said Dougal. I really don't. Oh, you, said Florence. Listen. Oh, I feel like lighting up, said the star. Back to work, I hope, said Dougal. Oh, I wish I was a star, said Florence, sighing.